Hello, my lovely anatomists and physiologists. Michele Glass here. We are still working through our chapter 14 information, and we want to pick up here a few details about cranial nerves. So we've mentioned cranial nerves in previous lectures, and of course, this is a topic that we're covering as part of our lab work. So we remember from our lab that we have 12 pair of cranial nerves, and we can see these 12 listed for us here. And it's important to pay attention that our cranial nerves are assigned both a name and a number, and we are responsible for both of those pieces of information. When we talk about our cranial nerves, we will see that we are innervating the tissue of the head and the neck, and that the cranial nerve is going to be ipsilateral. Double check my spelling. Ipsilateral is the opposite word for contralateral. So remember, we talked about the spinal nerves as being contralateral, meaning cross body. Ipsilateral would be same side. So here we'll see the right side of the face and neck is being controlled by the right hemisphere, the right brain there. And then the other thing to pay attention to is that our cranial nerves can be either sensory, motor, or both. So we saw in the case of our spinal nerves that all spinal nerves are mixed, meaning containing both sensory and motor information. But here we see with our cranial nerves that it can be sensory, it can be motor, or it can have both sensory and motor. So let's go through our list and just sort of identify those cranial nerves that are sensory. So sensory means part of the afferent division, collecting sensory information and then bringing that into the central nervous system. We're going to see cranial nerve number 1, olfactory, cranial nerve number 2, optic, and then cranial nerve 8, vestibulocochlear. When we talk about the the olfactory nerve, that's named for the sensation of olfaction, which is our sense of smell. The optic nerve comes straight off of the eyeball into the brain, so this is part of our vision. And then the vestibulocochlear is going to be bringing sensory information from the inner ear. So this is going to be hearing, this is going to be gravity and acceleration. And this is going to be the position of the head in space. A lot of times we talk about gravity, acceleration, head in space as equilibrium and balance. If you want to sort of simplify, in that way you can. When we look then at our motor cranial nerves, we're going to see our oculomotor, we're going to see trochlear and abducens, and we're also going to see accessory spinal and hypoglossal. So these will be our motor cranial nerves. And so ocular motor, we're going to see it involved in movements of our eye. So literally that translates to oculo eye motor, like motor control, right? We'll also see it lift the upper eyelid. And we'll see it involved in pupillary constriction. We'll see the trochlear and the abducens also involved in eye movement. So these these nerves are going to be controlling different groups of muscles here. And as we get into the accessory spinal, we're going to see it having a lot of control of neck muscles. And we don't have to be super specific here. And the hypoglossal, hypo means below, glossal is tongue. So we're going to see here muscles of the lower throat and the tongue. And then finishing up here, we have those cranial nerves that are doing both collecting sensory information and controlling motor information. So let's do sensory first. So trigeminal is going to do cutaneous sensations of the face. So that's a huge collection: touch, pressure, vibration, pain, temperature, all of those that we've talked about in the past. Facial is going to be involved in the sense of taste. You can just write gustation if you'd like. We can do that for glossopharyngeal as well. So here I'm going to go ahead and write the word gustation instead of sense of taste. And then for trigeminal, let's do our muscle motor control. So this is going to be muscles for what's called mastication, which is our fancy word for chewing. For facial, we're going to see production of saliva. And we're going to see facial expressions, muscles for facial expressions. When we look at the glossopharyngeal, we had gustation there as well. We also get production of saliva here. And then we're going to get muscles of the oral cavity in the throat. I saved the vagus for last because the vagus is the one that we're going to talk about significantly in the parasympathetic nervous system. So we're going to see like maybe 70% of parasympathetic response being controlled by the vagus. So this is one coming off of the brainstem, extending through thoracic and abdominopelvic cavities. It's listed as a both nerve. So even while we think about it as having a lot of this motor control for parasympathetic nervous system, clearly it's also collecting some important sensory information. That's it for cranial nerves. Stay tuned for our next video. And as always, take care of yourselves and each other.